Mockups are great, but at the same time they're also pretty terrible. The reason why is that they give you kind of false promise that when you test something, that they actually do it, but it's really hard to check what they're testing, how they're doing it, etc. Now, another thing is that they take a long time to make and they take a long time to run. I've been on a project where it took like an hour to run, like just your test, so we would never run our test. If you make a unit test, you can easily get that to run within a second or a millisecond.
Bruh.
So it's a lot easier just to have a lot of unit tests that test things. But how can you do this? Well, if we take here screen 1, you can see that there's an example of a user creation API. This is kind of Python, kind of pseudocode, but you should get the gist of it. Okay. So we have here where we do the we take a look at the password, that it's not the same. If it's not the same, we return. If the length of the password is below 8 characters, we return that it's too small. And then we finally check that the user doesn't exist already in the database with the username. It could be the email as well, whatever. Like, these are just examples. Some of these you would probably just do on the front end side. You don't really need to do it on the back end side. But yeah, and then afterwards we decrypt the password. You should always decrypt your password. And then you create a user. Now, then we return OK, and that's it.
Boom, bam, bop, bada bop, boom, pow.
Now, this is the traditional way to do it with, and with doing it with mockups, we would maybe have to make a mockup of the database. That means that every time we would do this test, we would have to fake all the data in the database, we'd have to make a user in the database, we'd have to make one where we test with the user and one where we test without the user. It could easily end up taking just a few seconds to run this, or even like if you have a lower performing system and you have a lot of migration, it might take a long time to set it up. And so we want to do something else that's not so complicated. One way we can do this is on screen 2 here, where what we do is we actually pull the things out and we are making a new function. And so we have 2 functions for this instead. Now, the first function, this is the checking if the new user exists, and we just simply do a lot of checks. This is kind of a pure function, and we can very easily check that this is working as it's supposed to. And it will take very little time with unit tests. Everyone can unit test this. It's very easy, simple. We put it in some variables. We see what it returns. Now, we also have the new user, and you can see we use this function called check new user, and if it returns an error, we return the error, and then afterwards we can do the decrypt. Now, the reason why this is fantastic is that the most complicated part of the logic that usually goes wrong is this thing that are in check new user. So now the most complicated part is checked, and you can very easily just go through the rest of the code and see, okay, the decrypt and the create is working as well. It's also easier to understand and see, like, okay, like what we have to do to check a user. So it's pretty straightforward. And yeah,